Welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on their journey toward publication. I'm Christina Catane, and I write in multiple genres, including Christian dystopian fiction.
I'm Rhonda Hagerman, and I write both fiction and nonfiction. I'm currently working on a series of articles for my hometown historical society.
I'm Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
Okay, so we like to start each episode with a segment we call What's Up? It's a time to check in with one another and see where we are in our writing journey and in our personal lives. So, what's up, Rhonda?
Well, honestly, this week I haven't done a lot of writing. This was going to be my last week of writing, outlining 5 articles and finishing 2, and I didn't do either one of those. I thought about it, and I thought about it throughout the week, but I've had family in town, had finishing up my garden, and those are all my excuses, and they're all done. So next week I'll be back on track.
Okay, what about you, Jamie?
Well, I had a pretty good writing week despite the heat here keeping me out of my designated writing space. Thanks to you ladies and our awesome writing sprints that we do remotely, I'm pretty happy with my progress. Still not so happy about not having my website done. I'm trying to do WordPress, which is challenging. And so I'm looking forward to the episodes that we're planning to do in the future about websites.
Jennifer?
Well, I am actually very pleased with the amount of writing I got accomplished this week, but I'm kind of confused in the direction it's gone because all of a sudden I find myself in the middle of writing a contemporary Christian romance, which is not usually my thing, and I'm loving it. And again, because of sprints, I'm getting a lot accomplished. Sunday is normally not a writing day for me, but I found myself writing with just Jamie. I think it was just the two of us writing that day and that evening, and I had like almost 2,000 words in. Like, it was just very exciting for me. So
Wow.
yeah, so I'm loving these characters, I'm loving the storyline, but I really do need to get back to the Phoebe story and get some editing done. So, but yeah, I've been very busy. How about
Great.
you?
What about
Yeah, what about you, Tina?
Yeah.
Well, I finished the storyline for my first act.
All right.
Yeah, but it's not long enough. So I'm trying to decide whether I need to try to stick some more in it or if I'm just going to keep going and worry about it later. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with that right now.
What do you mean when you say it's not long enough?
Well, it's going to be a 4-act story, and if you are aiming for 80,000 words, then the first act should be about 20,000 words, and I'm about 6,000 words shy of that. I mean, I don't need to have exactly 20,000. I'd like to be a little closer.
And I'm just asking for the benefit of our listeners who may be totally brand new to writing and marketing and all that, but why are you arbitrarily saying your story has to be 80,000 words? What is the logic there?
Because that's what the standard is for the industry.
And for that genre.
For the genre I'm writing in, most books are about 80,000 words. And when I go back to edit, probably a lot of words are going to be cut. And so I don't want to be too low, and then I'm going to be cutting words on top of that. So,
Awesome.
Okay.
I would love in a future episode for us to be able to talk about your what you're writing right now, Tina, with an outline as opposed to in the past when you'd pantsed it a lot, because I'm pantsing when I'm writing right now, and it's like a whole different experience for me. So that would be a really great episode for us in the future too to talk about
Yeah, that would be fun.
pantsing. So.
Yeah. Okay. This week's topic is from our Faith and Writing series, and it's family, faith, and career, fitting it all in. So we're all busy. For instance, I am married to a preacher, and he's in between churches right now, but when he wasn't, I was teaching 2 Bible studies, the Sunday school board president, homeschooling my son, working part-time online, trying to be a domestic goddess and, chef extraordinaire. And now on top of that, I'm deciding I'm going to be an author. So What about you guys? How busy are your lives?
Oh, I was just thinking today, I wish I could add another activity to my children's calendar. So I have three children and I also homeschool, so that's a job. And then, like you said, the domestic goddess, well, I fail in that area. But, I mean, you have to make some concessions somewhere. You just can't get everything done. But anyway, like you, things are just super busy. I have commitments outside of the home and in the home.
I'm the same. I have three children. I do not homeschool as of yet. It is something we are considering. But the end of school year we just finished up was like insane. All the class parties and all the end of the year things you have to do, like you forget about. I think it's kind of like childbirth. Like you forget about it, and then all of a sudden, like it's time to do it again. You're like, ah. But so summer, I think, oh, it'll be so much better. And I don't think I've had a single day that I didn't have to leave the house, or I didn't have to go do something, or I didn't have some obligation that I had to do. And then days that I don't have obligations, it seems like I fill it up with things like, it's warm. I need to do this now while it's still warm here in Michigan. And I need to, like, we need to paint our living room, which I all of a sudden added this week because shopping with my mother, we found a real great deal. We've been looking at this china cabinet at Salvation Army, and they wanted $200. This is back in February, and I'm like, it is not worth $200. And then my mom said, well, when it gets to $100, I'll buy it for you. Well, it went to $100 a couple months ago, and I didn't tell her because I'm like, it's not worth $100 to me, and she doesn't need to go buy me furniture, right? My mom that's one of her spiritual, or not spiritual gifts, one of her gifts. She likes her love language. She likes to give presents, and so I didn't say anything. Well, then last week I was in there and it was down to 60. And I'm like, well, 60 is kind of good. And as I'm leaving the store, the lady says, see you next week. Half off tags will be the blue ones. Guess what color the tag was? So I purchased a $30 china cabinet. So now I have to paint the house, the room, because once you put a china cabinet in place, you don't want to move it again. So this is me, right? Like my life is busy. I have kids, and we still have like things we have to do, and then you have crazy me who's constantly adding on projects that do we really need to paint? Well, in my mind, we do, and so that's what we're doing. So, what about you, Rhonda? How's life been for you lately?
Life's been great. I'm, busy just like everybody else is. You know, thankfully, my life is full of things that I love doing, not things that I'm forced to do. But when my kids were younger, my youngest is going to be a sophomore in college this year. And when the girls were still in high school, everything was so structured because basically everything was based around their lives and school and activities and that sort of thing. And last year was my first year in, 25 years of being able to schedule my own days for my own self. And I really didn't know how to prioritize. And so I put a lot of effort into that, and I pared everything down to the things I really want to have in my life. And so yesterday was my Historical Society meeting, and I came home with 2 more boxes, banker's boxes, full of information to scan and digitize and organize. And I love it, but
Yay.
It's like piling up. So.
Yay.
Awesome. So on top of all of these commitments, we've decided to become writers. How does that work?
Well, okay. So you dip your toe in with something like, well, in my case, National Novel Writing Month in November, NaNoWriMo, right? And then you're like, well, what am I going to do with this thing that I created in November? And so you kind of flippity-floppity, well, maybe someday. Well, then you just, if you're like me, one day you just decide, I'm going to start calling myself a writer. I'm going to do this. I'm going to publish this trunk novel that I have sitting here, or I'm going to write this story that's just nagging at me, and you just basically decide you're going to do it.
And I don't think it happens overnight. Maybe for some people it does. But like I remember for me, my whole life I've wanted to be a writer, and I've kind of written this or that. My first novel I wrote when I was in 4th grade. My mom still has it. It was about a little girl who was 10 and her horse Buddy. I had a horse Buddy. And so like, it was real creative. But she still has it, she says. But for me, a couple of years ago, my husband got put on nights, and we never saw him. My kids were in school, and so he would work. he was working nights, he'd be sleeping during the day, and then he would get up while they were still at school. He'd eat something, and then he would be home for 15 minutes while they were home before he left again. And so in that time period, I was listening to a Bible study, and the person said, "It's not what you go through; it's what you do with what you go through. It's not the troubles that you experience; it's how you handle those troubles." And so, in praying with God, like I really felt like God say to me, "You've always wanted time to write. This is the time." And I thought about it. And it's like after the kids went to bed, I had hours because my husband wasn't there. Normally, that's the time we would spend together, and so I started writing then. And I thought I'll keep it a secret and I'll write the book and show him as if it's going to happen in a month or something, right? This is like a new writer. Like I'm thinking this is going to be so great. But that's how it started for me. So just like Jamie, like you do it, you just kind of start it, and at some point you just get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm a writer. How does this? Then you have to start figuring out how does this figure into real life? Like I cannot continue. My husband wasn't on nights forever, so how do you continue this? And probably for everybody, it's probably different, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, mine was really similar because I've been telling stories since I was a little girl. You know, I was adopted, so I told all the kids at school that the reason I was adopted was because my biological parents were from warring mafia families, and my life was there was a hit out on my life because I was half this family and half that family, and so they had to send me off to Alaska to hide me. And it went on from there. I mean, I made up a boyfriend at one point, and I wrote myself letters with my left hand to try to sell it. I might have gone a little overboard when his plane crashed over the Amazon and he found a ruby mine and we became rich. My friends started to question whether this boyfriend was real at that point. But and I've always loved to make up stories. I have like this narration going on in my head all the time. So I just decided, like Jamie said, after NaNoWriMo one year, I just decided if I'm going to be a writer, then I have to call myself a writer, and I have to just schedule it into my day and act like I'm a writer.
Great. So I guess at some point, then when you've decided that you're going to call yourself a writer, then like you have to make a commitment, right? Like if it's going to actually work and you're actually going to do this, like I'm sure there are a lot of people listening or watching this podcast and they're thinking they're probably where we were a few years ago. They're probably at the point where they found a little bit of time to write, or they have an idea and they're just kind of like whenever they have time, when the muse hits, they're sitting down and writing. And they haven't gotten to this point yet. And I guess the next step that, for me at least, that I took was making a commitment. So for me, that was actually saying to my husband, I'm going to do this, And so we're going to talk about, I guess, about family later. But what about the rest of you guys? Did you guys get to a point where you just had to make a commitment to yourself to do it, or did it just come naturally for you that you did it?
Oh, I for sure. Go ahead, Rhonda.
I was just going to say that I decided the first year that I did Nano was my youngest daughter's senior year, and I decided then that I'm going to start having free time where I can actually write. And I had done Nano in the past, but the first year I was really committed to it was her senior year, and that's when you've got a story inside you, and if it has to come out, then eventually you're going to become a writer. Whether you really put the time and effort into it that needs or not. So you'll either be satisfied getting that story out, or you'll be miserable thinking about it all the time for the rest of your life. And by the way,
horrible.
My first story was actually, they didn't call it then, but everybody know the Black Stallion stories?
Yeah.
Well, this was fan fiction for Alec was the hero of my story, and he went to Egypt, and anyway, so that was my first story.
I want to read that.
I've been looking for it. If I find it, I will let you guys read it. It'll be horrible.
Yeah, I oddly, even though I've been writing with NaNoWriMo, I've been doing nano projects for a long time now, but I never wanted to sell books. I never wanted to sell myself. I never wanted to sell stories. So I really put off making a huge commitment to doing the work that it would take for writing to actually be a career, be something that could be considered a income for our family until just recently. And I was just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to, because the way I see it, I'm young enough to have another whole career. You know, I had worked before I was married outside of the home, and I'm young enough to still go out into the workforce and do something for a company, or to do some work on my own that is my work and be my own boss. And so I'm thinking any job I take, any career I start at this stage of my life is going to have what my dad calls the shoveling the monkey poop part of the job. Because he's like, oh, everybody wants to be a zookeeper and be with the animals, but they don't think about the part that you have to shovel the monkey poop. And so he's like, every job you do, there's going to be a part where you have to get in there and shovel the monkey poop. He's like, you need to find work where that part is not so bad. And so I'm like, fine, I'll learn marketing, I'll learn. And I've just committed myself, primarily because, you know, I have a husband who travels and works very hard physically, and, well, he's not going to be able to do that forever. And if there's a way that we can have some income coming in the years when he's not able to be working any longer, I say, why shouldn't I give it a shot?
Agreed.
Awesome.
And so part of what does commitment mean then? I mean, it's not just a mental thing, right? Like we had to, like for me, I know I had to decide that like I've got to commit the time. I know we've talked about this in previous like podcasts, but like it's about like prioritizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But,
You know, I was really busy when I started doing this and teaching classes, and so I had to schedule a time where I was said, this is when I'm going to write, and this is when I'm going to, this is going to be my priority during this time, and then the other stuff I'll do during this time, and that worked for me for a while, but my life is a little too crazy for my schedules always end up not working out, but
Mm-hmm.
I have to at least have that commitment and make sure my family knows this is a commitment, this is a priority for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just had to decide I wanted to quit putting out fires, and I wanted to intentionally enjoy what I was doing. So that's when I decided to prioritize.
That's great.
Right, because there's always going to be life that happens.
right.
When you know, no matter what you're trying to do, even if, you know, you're working at the Five and Dime down the road, there's life happens, and then you have to make decisions, and you have to decide what's important.
Yeah, and you have to learn what to say no to. I'm a really big fan of talking to moms and telling them, look, I'm going to give you permission to flex your no muscle. Are you telling me that you can't bring a dozen cupcakes to Friday because, you know, that's also the week that your son's graduation party is and blah, 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 blah? Go ahead and tell me no, because I think a lot of times we're inclined to say yes to everything, and we don't feel that we have permission to say no. And the loudest voice always gets the yes, whether it's what we're called to do or feel we need to be doing in the season of our life. It's the people that we're, for whatever reason, afraid to tell no that get our attention and our commitment, when that's not necessarily how we should prioritize and spend our time.
Right.
And you know, those loudest voices aren't always the ones that are the most fruitful either, or the most even encouraging to, you know, you or your family. And that's the other thing too, is I look at writing as this is the beginning of this is something for my family. This isn't just for me. It will fulfill me. It's something I've always wanted to do, but it's for my family as well. And so I have to prioritize things like, is this something that is going to be a good thing for my family, or am I just doing it because someone needs to do it? And I've really learned to like step back, because I think there's a lot of people, especially at my church, at any church, there are a lot of people I think that are willing to do things, but they don't see a whole. They think everything's working fine, and so they don't step up. And if I keep doing things that I don't want to do or I don't feel called to do just because it needs to be done, then those people aren't going to be able to step up. That's kind of how I feel about it too. So I've been really learning to step back and allow others to do things. So.
And I kind of learned the hard way, being a pastor's wife and teaching 2 Bible studies and president of the Sunday school. When you're doing too much, you're not doing any one thing well. Like none of it's really getting your full attention, and it's kind of like you're juggling all these plates and trying to keep them spinning. And so I had to do that. I had to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this and this anymore because I'm not doing anything well, and I want to do. This is what I'm going to focus on at that time, And so you have to say no. You have to prioritize.
Well, and I will speak to the other end of it. I will speak to the tendency to not be real honest with yourself about how you're actually spending your time. So you can blame people asking you to commit to this or that, or you can really take a hard look at how much time you spend on Facebook or watching television or cruising Hobby Lobby for that 40% off thing you want to buy with your coupon, or any of these other fun things that we like to do that we could just be spending that 10 or 15 minutes spitting out a couple hundred of words, and I'm not going to lie and pretend that there was even the most busy, overwhelmed time that I had, little kids, 3 in diapers or whatever, that I was like, couldn't have made some time to write. If I just would have said, I don't need to, look at the Facebook or play Candy Crush or any of that stuff. I need to invest in my writing career and spend just a 10-minute little bit writing. And I think that, so there is a balance. Like, I mean, yes, of course, you need to be mindful of how you're spending your time, but at the same time, you need to be mindful of how you're spending your time. You can't just go around blaming your outside commitments.
Right.
It's very true.
Because honestly, what we prioritize, what we value the most, we spend our time on. If you value Facebook, then you spend your time on Facebook. So it's about what you value and what you consider a priority.
Sure. I mean, and there's no shame if the facts are just that you're not someone who's like real jazzed about publishing right now. It's not like you're a bad person or something. You just need to be honest with yourself. Like, you don't want to be sitting around saying, gee, if only I could find the time to write, and then post about, gee, if only I could find the time to write on your Twitter or Instagram or something,
Right.
So it's all about just being honest with yourself, because you may just be in a season where you're just writing for now, just for fun, and you're not, looking to sell it or publish it or anything like that. And that's totally okay too.
Yeah,
It is.
Just keep writing. It's great.
Okay, great. So let's talk about, we've made the decision and we've made it a priority. How practically do we do this?
Oh, we need to look at Rhonda's schedule that she does, her like bullet journal thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, after that nano, when I decided that I was going to be intentional about my writing, and I needed to come up with a schedule, because like I said, that year was just sort of crazy for me. So anyway, I just started jotting some notes down, and I'm a big fan of some different organizers out there, but their plans worked for a little bit, but I couldn't really stick with them because they were too structured. So I need something that's helps me organize, but it's not super structured. So I found a bullet journal, and that saved my life and my days. And basically what it does is it takes all these ideas that are swimming around in my head and puts them on paper. And just that one thing clears my mind. And I just cannot express how much that helps, just that little bit, to have a clear mind. So basically what I do every morning is, well, actually the night before, so I don't have to think about while I'm falling asleep, I write down everything that I need to accomplish. And then I write down everything I want to accomplish. And then when I get up in the morning, before I get out of bed, I read my Bible, and then I look at my journal. And I decide what my first steps are going to be. I might need to do the laundry that day, or I might need to write 500 words, or I might need to take the kids to the doctor. Well, the doctor, that's got a specific time. But those other things, I can prioritize depending on how I'm feeling that day, as long as I get those all accomplished. And also, when they're swirling around in my head, it might have felt like I've got so much to do, I'm never going to accomplish everything. But it blew me away. After just the first week, I went back and I looked at what I had done through the week. I had accomplished probably 3 times as much as I normally did, because I just wanted to accomplish the list. And the list was not as big as it had been turned into in my mind. So that is why I use a bullet journal.
I totally understand what you're saying, because sometimes when your multitude of obligations are and your things that you know you have to do, they swirl around in your head, and I'm like visualizing it first as kind of like a weird tornado, like, you know, the Tasmanian devil from the old cartoons.
Yeah.
And then, you know, or like a big buffalo running around kicking up a bunch of dust.
Right.
And you just
Both
kind
of
of
them
feel
together.
like you're standing there like this, like, how do I even grab hold of any one task to accomplish it? And
Right.
so I think what you're saying is then you just organize all of those thoughts, and then you can just handle
Right.
them. Yeah.
And the beauty of a bullet journal is you don't actually have to organize it. You just write it down. You just blurt it out onto the paper. And then, you know, it's more organized now than it was in the beginning. But just getting those first things done, the first month under my belt using the journal every day, just was amazing.
I
And
love
there's something really satisfying about checking off or highlighting or whatever something.
Yes.
Sometimes I put things I've already done on my list just so I can do that.
Yeah, I know.
I'm totally serious. I know you think I'm kidding,
No,
but
because I do that too.
Yeah.
And some people actually erase the things after they're done, and no way. I want to see what I've done.
Yes.
Yeah. I want
It's just
proof.
not- Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't do a bullet journal, but I do a happy planner. And you can always tell when my life falls apart
Mhm.
is when I'm not using it. And if I pulled it out right now, you would see nothing written in it. So
Mhm.
it's time for me to
Right.
get back to it. So
Yeah.
you're right. You're inspiring. I need to get it back out and make my list.
Do you want to know some of the pages I have in my bullet journal?
Yes. Let's see them.
Let's see.
We have
Okay,
a few minutes for that.
Okay. So this is my daily. I don't know if you can see that well or not.
Yep. Yeah.
But it's just my daily one for, this is actually last year's journal. But, you know, and I like doodling too, so that gives me a place to do that and keep it and look at them again. I don't know.
And
Anyway,
so it's
for my-
all, you did it. You did all of it. Not like you didn't buy the book looking like that.
No, I didn't. I went to the dollar store, my first one, and because I thought I'm not going to stick to this one either, so I'm not going to spend $30 on a journal because they can be up to $100,
Yeah.
and I've got other things to buy for $100. So I just went and I just started. It was just a notebook, and I just wrote it down. So they've gotten cuter over the years. Let's see, this is my third year. This one I paid $5 for, so I'm moving.
Moving up in the world.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got, this is Nano related, a Preptober. So I've got all the things I want to accomplish specific to my novel for this year coming up. And then I've got a basic outline. So I am not a pantser. You know, we were talking about that with Tina earlier. So I've got, if I'm kind of stuck on what I want to write that day, I feel like I can jump around a little bit more and have scenes for later in the book that are an idea. And having this all written down just helps me know where I am. And I've got things for my personal life, like I want to read every day. So I've got a list for the books I've read this year and also a tracker to make sure that I can check it off because I've read that day. And it's kind of sad when I go back and I see, 5 days in a row I didn't write. Oops. I didn't read. So I try to make up for that. And, you know, I track my water and I check my exercise. And let's see, what else do I have for? Oh, I've got a page specifically for archetypes, specifically for titles, and I was just rereading those a few minutes ago, and I feel like I need to write a couple more books.
Hey.
And
good.
plot ideas. And, you know, so I carry this with me. It is my best friend. It is always in my purse. And when I'm sitting there doing whatever at the bank or whatever, and I have a thought, I have somewhere to jot it down. Because for so long, I've had these thoughts, and I think, I'll remember that. And you know you never do. I never do. So
Right. We'll probably have to
I've got-
revisit the Bujo then when we do the
Yes,
putting versus
for
pantsing.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are running short of time, so
Okay.
we wanted to talk about a few other things about setting deadlines and designating a space and getting support.
Yeah, I really want to talk about the family support too. Can we talk about that for sure before
Yeah.
we're done? I think it's super important as writers that we have a supportive family, and I think it starts at the beginning, and it starts with us. I think that as a writer, if you're just starting out, you maybe your husband or your parents, depending on where you are in life, or your children, aren't really supportive. But have you like really asked them? Have you set them down and said, this is important to me. This isn't just something, some hobby or whatever, but I am prioritizing. Share with them your goals. Share with them where you are in writing and what you want to accomplish with it, and get them on board. Um, I remember I told you guys already that I was going to surprise my husband with this novel, and a few chapters in, I realized, no, this would be going on forever. I need to, and so I was a little nervous, and I sat him down and talked to him, and then I shared with him something I wrote, and I think that was the beginning of him being my biggest fan. He really is very supportive. He's my biggest fan, but it's because I brought him on the inside. Like, he's part of the process. What do you guys think? Like, how does you work with your family with what you do, and do you think it's important to have them on board, or?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I mean, even if it's just respecting your time, where you say, this is my time that I've set aside. I'm doing a podcast. Please don't come in, and ask me for where your socks are while I'm recording the podcast. Things like that. That's definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then it's kind of almost like telling the whole world you're on a diet, and then they're going to raise an eyebrow if you order that dessert. If you tell someone that is close to you that you're doing this, then they're going to ask you, so, how are your books coming? And not from a place of like tisk tisk, like that dieting friend might be, but from a place of like, look, I'm excited for you. You had enthusiasm, and it's someone to kind of be a reminder of that initial spark of, woohoo, I'm writing a book that you might have had in the beginning on those tough days when the sun doesn't want to seem to shine and the words don't seem to want to come. You will have a cheerleader in your own home, and there's nothing really quite like that if you can get them on board.
Right.
Right.
I understand that not everybody has that, even if you try really hard and you sit your family down, and you may not have that same kind of support. So you need to look elsewhere. And I guess my next suggestion would be with a writing group. We've talked about writing groups before on the podcast and how important they are for the four of us, and how important it should be for any author, but especially a Christian author. Like our group, not just this podcast, but the writing group we are in, Jamie had started just a little bit ago doing a Facebook accountability thread every day. She puts it up there, and then we respond. And it's been really, I don't know you guys can all speak to it too, but it's been really good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It has been.
I mean, there have been days that she's put it up there and I haven't written yet, and I don't want to admit that. So I sit down and I write.
And then
I swear. And so thank goodness for the accountability, because otherwise I would have written that day. So
Right.
even if you don't have a local writing group, find one online, or find friends that like to write, and it's really just important to have people that will support you and love you and keep you accountable. So
Right.
keep those
And
accountabilities up.
if you don't have anyone else, I hope you'll consider the Christian Indie Writers podcast one leg of your support system.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we want to help you stay accountable. And so if you have an idea how we could do that, let us know. Send us a little message or whatever. So,
Yes.
okay, now it's time for the feeding of the backs.
Woohoo!
It's feedback time. Here's a reminder of how feedback works. Here in the podcast, we submit a raw, fresh, unedited piece. This helps us develop a safe community for receiving criticism because we each take turns being utterly vulnerable. Because these are new, unedited works, we do not give criticism, only encouragement. And next week, we have something new for our listeners. This is really exciting, so stay tuned to learn more about that after we've done our sharing for this week, and we're going to tell you that. This week, we were once again given 15 minutes to write, and we were challenged to write a story with the following 8 words. They were die, gaff, effort, scheme, sea, sweater, woman, and corruption. And I want to remind everyone we had 15 minutes. So,
We always like to say that. It was only 15 minutes.
okay, so who's going to go first?
Oh,
I will.
gotcha.
Fine.
Oh, yay.
All right.
Okay. I was going to have to pick someone else. This
No, I-
pressure was too much.
So before we started this one, and I read the words, I'm like, all right. And I sat there, the timer started, I just sat there and stared at it. And then I realized, you know what? They don't all have to be home runs, right? And then I started writing it, and I actually kind of like it. So word sprints work. Okay. The scheme had to work. It just had to. Maddie stepped over the gurgling water, making every effort to carefully place each step on the moss-covered stones, lest she falter and fall into the muddy waters. Lord, you parted the Red Sea. Least you could do was give me some dry rocks. She wasn't the kind of woman that asked God for trivial things. In fact, the last thing she could remember actually praying out loud was when she begged God not to let her son die. He hadn't answered that prayer, and she didn't expect him to answer this one. But when faced with no other option, she found herself turning to the God she had long ago given up on. Somehow she reached the other side of the creek with only wet feet to complain about, which wasn't worth complaining about as she saw it. She picked up her skirts and hurried up the side of the bank. It had only been a tiny blunder, a gaffe for goodness sakes, and had the law in Dusty Meadows not been the hotbed of corruption that it was, the whole matter would have likely blown over, like a tumbleweed on a hot July day. But the law was corrupt, and a man's life was on the line, all because Maddie had made a mistake. Maddie reached the outskirts of town within minutes. She pulled her sweater tightly around her, warding off the chill that only she felt, and marched toward the salvation of the handsome stranger, and to her own destruction.
Ooh.
Are you sure you didn't do that last night?
No, seriously, it just happened.
I
That's
love
good.
That was
the
really good.
tumbleweed. The tumbleweed on the hot July day. I love
Thanks. I
that.
thought it might have been too cliche, but I like it.
I was picturing Clint Eastwood from back in the day,
Mm.
in those movies. Yeah.
Maybe it's his life on
Yeah.
the line.
Hmm.
That was very poetic and
It
good.
was.
Aw.
It's yeah, wow.
Mhm.
That-
And then you leave so many questions. What mistake?
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I wish I knew. I can't wait to finish this. Uh,
Your characters haven't told you yet, have they?
No.
Right?
no idea.
All right. Who's next? Jamie, you want to go next?
Okay. Didn't get to the end this time, but
That's
so
okay.
here we go. The woman shivered. It was almost midnight, and the alley was cold. The men surrounding her and her husband didn't seem to notice, warmed as they were by the thrill of having encountered such an easy mark. Their jeering and hollering felt like uninvited caresses as they slid along with a dozen pair of strangers' eyes over her. She hugged her sweater closer and watched as her husband took a die from the 5 that were offered to him and held it up to the streetlight, as if doing so could reveal to him some barely perceptible corruption. You gonna shoot or what? The game boss, if that's what he was, the woman was not sure what title was appropriate to bestow upon the man who appeared to own the dice, looked at her husband with a mouth pressed as thin as the crepes she'd had for dessert, not half an hour before. How she longed now for the candlelight, the linen napkins, the clink of fork and knife against the fine china. Her husband threw the dice, and there was a flurry of activity. Money was thrown on the ground and picked up over and again. Each clatter of the dice, hitting first the wall and then the ground, caused a reaction from the men, a mixture of jubilation and disappointment. She couldn't make sense of the game and did not care to. "We should go," she said, trying a tone she hoped only her husband's ears would hear. "I'm down 50. We'll leave in a minute, Shar." "Yeah, Shar," said a laughing voice somewhere over her right shoulder. "Casanova gon' play till he done cleaned out." "Or at least until I got my Benjamin back," said another voice in the dark. Shar closed her eyes and clasped her hands together, head bowed. "Lord," she silently prayed, "please get me out of this." She opened her eyes, and again the dice were flying. She watched her husband, looking at him for what seemed like the first time. Forehead sweating, eyes bulging, nothing left at all of the boyish look she remembered from their first date at Chez Lemur. She watched him as though panning out on a camera, his form gradually diminishing, and realized that she had started to back away, taking small, quiet steps in the direction of the restaurant's back door. The men, still focused on the dice, did not seem to notice as she slipped ...
So good.
I want to know what happened.
Wow. I love that you use die for dice, like in a totally different way. That's so great. Like
Right.
when you first said it, I'm like the die, and I'm like I'm thinking like a die, even like for printing, and then oh, so good.
I love your description of inside the restaurant and the
Yeah.
silverware clinking on the china
Yeah.
and
And her
the
crepe thin lips.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like an anniversary or
good.
something, right? Because she's talking about thinking about their first date, and like she's describing where what they're outside of. So I'm assuming it's like an anniversary, and it's just like, oh, if you could only go back in time, right?
Yeah, and I really, if I had more time with the piece, I would have really wanted to show the relationship wilting and that this is sort of a rock bottom situation for him because, it would have started in the big fancy casinos or kind of whatever, and she would have gone along on trips that were like fun. And now here they were, right? But 15 minutes, what can you do?
Yeah.
You did great.
Right.
You did a lot.
It's not just the actual scene that you set so well, but it's like the emotional scene too.
Yeah.
You get the
thank
whole,
you.
you get both of it.
I was like
Thank
so
you.
anxious inside of me for her. So,
Mhm.
Yeah,
really
very good. Very
Appreciate
good.
that. Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, Rhonda, it's your turn.
Okay, next time I'm going first because I'm not following those people again.
Okay. Stop.
Okay.
You're always
I-
amazing.
Yes, I love what you write.
I hand wrote again because last
Yay!
week I did too much editing when I tried to type it. All right. Oh, God, I want to die. My melodramatic friend Melanie cries out in the middle of our pop quiz. It's an effort not to roll my eyes at her, but her head is buried in her hands anyway. It's only a pop quiz, Miss Brown, not a nuclear meltdown. Mr. O'Hara, our government teacher, says in his monotone way. I doubt Melanie is consoled. She starts to fan herself and then lets her sweater fall from her shoulders. She pulls the upright collar on her polo shirt away from her neck and takes a deep breath with some effort. I understand why she's frustrated. If she fails another quiz, then she's off the cheer squad for the rest of the semester. Our team can't lose her. The outcome of this quiz doesn't affect Melanie alone. I spot Ashley lean over closer to Melanie. I know she's got a scheme to give Mel the answers. Ash glances back at me and catches me mid-eye roll. I don't care what she thinks. She already tried to get me kicked off the squad when I wouldn't cheat on last year's quiz. I return the face she made at me with my best performance smile. I just guaranteed a silent treatment for... And that was it.
No way!
Wow. So good.
I love it how they just start with the nickname. So like you introduce the character and then immediately it's like your characters refer to them as a nickname. I love that. It like immediately shows that they're like tight, that they've been I really like that's a fun little story.
Yes.
And it's so developed. Like she already tried to get me kicked off last time, but it didn't feel like you were just dumping information at us. It just totally sounded like here's the reason why she's just getting a fake smile from me.
Yeah.
She's a book.
Yeah,
Great job.
really good. I want to know what happens.
Me too. Does she fail? And and it's like there's consequences for other people, not just the girl who fails. I like that. That's high stakes. Very good.
High stakes.
Love it.
All right.
All right, Tina, you're up.
Okay. There was no praying in mine, I just have to say. All right. Somewhere alongside the Mediterranean Sea, a woman walks. Her bare feet sink into the wet sand, leaving a trail behind. A cool wind blows down from the cliffs above, lifting her long brunette hair and twisting it into a sort of halo around her head. She pulls her sweater tighter around her body and walks on, unaware of the sunset painting the sky pink, beautiful enough to rival Rembrandt's best. The spot in her chest just below her breast aches with a physical stabbing pain, as if there were an actual knife there, twisting and pulling the life from her body. Tears of grief and guilt and anger stream silently down her cheeks, but she doesn't bother to wipe them away. She just continues to walk. Soon she sees the silhouette of a man walking toward her. It is obvious by his outline that he's wearing a suit. His dress shoes hang in his left hand as he strides purposely toward her. When they come face to face, they both stop. Though the woman hates the man with a hatred that seethes white hot, she is surprised to find that she is still struck somewhere deep inside by the beauty of the man each time she looks at him. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, are filled with regret and apology, but she doesn't care. I'm sorry, Sarah, he says, making an effort to sound sincere. I had no idea this scheme would go south. I underestimated the level of corruption in the company. I never meant for anyone to die. Not just anyone died, said the woman. It was my son. You sent him there. It is your gaffe, and I judge you guilty, and I sentence you to death. With that, she lifted her hand that had been wrapped in her sweater, aimed her magnum at his forehead, and pulled the trigger.
Wow.
Went a totally different direction than I expected.
Oh. I did not see that coming.
I was running out of time.
Oh, I better kill him because I don't have time to finish the story, so let's just kill him. I love it. I love it.
It was really good.
I really loved her hair, created a halo around her because I can see that, like, because I have long hair. So, like, when you're out there, it does, like, crazy stuff like that and goes up in the air, and I love that. And the actual knife, and great imagery. So good.
Thank you.
I love the emotional pull, too. Like, I thought it was going to be her husband. I thought you were going to tell us that he had cheated or something like that, and total twist. That was awesome. Such great imagery, man.
Yeah, I loved rivaling Rembrandt's best for the sunrise or sunset because I often feel that way. Like, wow, they just can be breathtaking sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder if other people that are listening or watching this podcast think, oh man, they're so talented. I could never do that. Let me tell you, you can do that. Like these writing sprints and these activities, I feel like they access a part of our brains that just we wouldn't access if we didn't do them, right? Like, because each one of us are like, let me just tell you, it only had 15 minutes. And we're like so critical of our own work, but every one of you wrote something amazing. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, it's so great. And yeah.
And you think, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to write something with these words? But the story just comes out. It's almost as if the story was there, and it just you just needed that list of words to bring it out.
I agree. Good stuff.
Okay, now it's time to visit the accountability corner where we check in with one another to make sure we're each moving forward on our journey toward publication. Of course, there's many different paths along this journey, and each one looks a little different. And we all know that everyone moves at their own pace. So in our group, we each set our own SMART goals, goals that are significant, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And then we announce them here on the podcast. So, Jen, how are you doing with your goals?
Not too bad, actually. I was trying to decide if I was going to up my goals and try to do like a nano-ish kind of a month. And I decided against it because I have so many other things going on. And so my goals for this week are I really have to get working on Phoebe because I've made it a goal that the first book, now Phoebe is the third book in the series. The first book, which is a novella, I want to release it next month. August, I mean. So August is my target date, and so it's scary to say it out loud, but I'm saying it out loud on purpose so that like there's like this extra accountability, right? So you guys can keep bugging me. How's it going? What's going on? So that's my goal. I'm working completely on getting Phoebe ready and getting the cover ready for the first book, which is Searching for Anna.
So I'm confused. So you're going to publish which book in August?
Searching for Anna.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Rhonda?
So Rhonda will be able to read all about Warren very soon.
Finally. It's been so long.
I know.
What about you, Rhonda?
Okay, well, I already told you that I didn't make last week's goals. So those were just for me to put in the bank. So I'm going to not worry about finishing that goal this week, although I might jot a few things down for the articles, the nonfiction articles. But what I really want to focus on this week is my blog post for my new blog. I have not actually made that public yet because I've got some old posts on it, and I need to add new content. So this week I'm going to focus on, I think I've done it in the past, and I think I can do it again, write 3 blog posts per day.
Wow.
And I've already got a list of like 30 ideas for a post. So I'm going to challenge myself to that. I've got a very busy day tomorrow, but I don't think that's going to hinder my goal. So that's what I'm working toward. I've already told, I promised my mom that for July, I wouldn't harass her to keep working on our book that we're working on together. So I'm going to, that's what I'm going to do this week.
Okay. Jamie?
Yeah, so I've been promising myself to write 5,000 words a week, and I did have another successful week. I wrote 11,274.
Wow.
Wow.
A lot of that is thanks to word sprints. So, for example, I had a 2,164 word day again on Sunday, like Jen was saying. When you just decide you're going to do it, I mean, really, that's maybe 3 or 4 word sprints at 500 each. So, like, for example, the 15 minutes that we took to do the writing exercise was 400 of my words for today. That is in the 500 range, right? And so if I know I can write 500 words in 15 minutes, a 2,000 word day shouldn't really blow me out of the water. The tricky part is, again, just manage and just knowing you're going to have those 2 hours when if you're going kayaking with your family or if you're doing 4th of July celebrations, are you going to be able to make 2 hours to get 500 times 4? That's 4 sprints. You know, so committing to 2,000 makes me scared, even though it seems like I can do 2,000 a day in a 5-day week. And I should be able to make the 10,000 word commitment, but I'm still scared to do that. So I'm going to commit to 7,000 words for next time.
Wow.
Because I do think that that is attainable based just on my track record. If you guys don't mind, I know we're short on time, but I can look up here what I did in June. I ended up doing 37,815 words in June.
Wow.
That's so great.
Yeah, so thank you. That's encouraging. My lowest day was 344.
But you
So it was
still
one
wrote.
day. I
right?
still wrote.
Yeah.
My commitment to myself is 500 a day, so it kind of bothers me that I didn't hit 500 that day, but I have a 4,000 word day that month, so I'm not going to beat myself up about it.
Good.
Right, and that's a third of a novel
Yeah, it sure is.
in a month. Yeah. Well, I'm finding myself at this transition point between acts, between Act 1 and Act 2, and I need to make a decision. So my goal is to make that decision. But in the meantime, I'm going to still try to write at least 1,000 words a day.
Now, you did finish Act 1. That was your goal for by the end of June, right?
Yes, and I did
So,
get there.
Yay.
Good for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Great.
So, Tina, what are those 1,000 words going to be on? Are they just to get your mind moving on the second act, or?
Well, I'm just going to keep writing, but I might have to add scenes to the first act to get up to add that 6,000 words, or I might just pad the scenes I have. Or I'm really thinking about pulling back my final disaster and making it my third disaster and adding to the whole outline, because I'm afraid that I don't have 40,000 words for the middle of the book, for the second and third acts. So we'll see. I have some serious, like I said, that's my goal. I have to make some decisions. So,
Great.
okay. I think now is a good time to remind our listeners that we have an excellent resource available to you when you join our mailing list. In addition to never missing an episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, you get a free download of our critique cheat sheet, which will help you both give and receive critique. So click the link below and join our mailing list and receive your free cheat sheet. And now it's time for our special announcement.
Drum roll.
Da-da-da.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Yes, it was.
We're not musicians, we're writers. Well, Jen's kind of a musician. Anyway, next week after the podcast, we'll be debuting what we're going to call a postcast. And then on the postcast, we are each going to submit an edited piece of writing for a full-on critique. This will be exclusive content available only to subscribers to our Patreon page. So please consider subscribing today so that you don't miss out on this awesome time of fellowship and critique.
Yeah, so, we only have been doing the little short exercises, and we've all just been very encouraging to one another. And so maybe some of you are thinking, does anybody ever get any real serious, tough to take criticism? What does that look like? Here's your chance to see how we do that.
So it'd be like what we did in episode 2, right?
Yeah.
But
that just was like forever long.
right.
Yeah.
So the episode never ends.
Yeah, that's what it was, for sure.
Right.
Awesome. So tune in next week. You can see what that's like.
Great.
So you
Okay,
can find below, we said this already, I think, but down below you'll find the link for our Patreon page. So come by and support us. You can support us just because you love us and you want us to continue this podcast, or if you want to get more stuff. So.
All right, awesome. So this concludes the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. Join us next week when our topic will be from our Faith in Fighting series, what to do when things fall apart. So until next week, may your pen be prolific, your adrenaline,
Adrenaline, I love it.
Right.
what to do when things fall apart, you just keep going.
Right.
Your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.